Welcome to our program. Today, we are conducting a comprehensive biographical review of Rolling Stone magazine. While most listeners will recognize the name and immediately associate it with rock and roll, the publication's history is really a much broader barometer for American culture, for politics, and journalism over the last half-century.
It is. It's a fascinating trajectory to map out.
We're going to trace the evolution of this entity from a San Francisco startup in the late 1960s to its current status as a global multimedia brand, now owned by the Penske Media Corporation.
And to understand Rolling Stone is, in a way, to understand a major shift in the media landscape itself. We're looking at a publication that began with a very specific, countercultural mission, and it eventually became a dominant institutional force. This analysis will cover its founding, its so-called golden era of reporting in the 1970s, the shift toward entertainment in the 80s and 90s, and of course the significant changes in ownership that have happened more recently.
And we also need to address the financial realities and the major editorial controversies that have, in many ways, defined the magazine's reputation in this century.
Absolutely. The financial side was often precarious, which is something many people don't realize.
It's often assumed that a magazine of this stature began with significant corporate backing, but the origins were far more modest. Let us begin in 1967.
That's right. The magazine was founded in San Francisco in 1967 by Jann Wenner and the music critic Ralph J. Gleason. And the financial foundation of the whole enterprise was actually quite fragile.
This wasn't a big money operation from the start?
Not at all. Wenner borrowed $7,500 to pay for the setup costs.
Which sounds like a lot for the time.
It was. To place that in a modern economic context, that $7,500 is equivalent to approximately $71,000 in 2024 value.
And where did he get that capital?
Well, he didn't secure it from a bank or a venture capital firm. It came from his family and from the parents of his future wife, Jane Schindelheim. It was a personal debt that launched what would become this media empire.
And the first issue arrived in November of that year.
November 9th, 1967. The format was a tabloid-sized pulp newsprint, which was, fairly standard for the era's underground press. The cover price was just 25 cents.
And the cover image itself was quite specific.
It was. It featured John Lennon. But it wasn't a standard promotional shot. It showed Lennon in costume wearing a Brody helmet. That's a type of steel combat helmet from the First World War.
From a film he was in.
Yes, from his role in the film How I Won the War. It was an immediate signal, really, that the magazine was looking at these cultural figures through a lens that was a little different from the standard fan magazines of the day.
Now, regarding the name Rolling Stone, there's a common misconception that it was solely a reference to Bob Dylan.
It's a very common attribution, and you can understand why, given the cultural weight of Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. But in the very first issue, Jann Wenner wrote an editor's letter that cast a much wider net for the inspiration.
So it was more than just Dylan.
Much more. He cited the old proverb, a rolling stone gathers no moss. He cited the Muddy Waters song, Rolling Stone. He cited the band, the Rolling Stones. And he also cited the Bob Dylan song. The idea was to encompass all of these elements.
What was his stated mission in that first letter?
Wenner explicitly stated that the publication was not just about the music, but, and this is a quote, about the things and attitudes that music embraces.
That editorial philosophy seems to be what distinguished it from other publications in San Francisco at that time.
Precisely. There was a very vibrant underground press in the 60s. You had papers like the Berkeley Barb, which took very radical, often chaotic political stances.
And Rolling Stone was different.
It was. It differentiated itself by embracing more traditional journalistic standards. They wanted to cover the hippie counterculture, but they wanted to do it with the rigor of a traditional newspaper. They were not trying to be a radical leaflet. They were trying to be a paper of record for that specific community.
This ambition is reflected in their long-running slogan.
All the news that fits.
It was a parody of the New York Times.
It was, absolutely. The slogan was provided by an early contributor, a writer named Susan Lyden. It's a direct play on the New York Times motto, all the news that's fit to print.
And when did that first appear?
It first showed up in the magazine around 1969, and it signaled that they took the news part of their mission seriously, but they were also, aware of their position as an alternative to the establishment media.
As we move into the 1970s, this commitment to journalism began to yield significant results, specifically outside the realm of just music reviews. This period is often referred to as the magazine's golden age.
The 1970s is really where Rolling Stone established itself as a political powerhouse. They did not stay in the lane of album reviews and concert coverage.
And a primary driver of this was Hunter S. Thompson.
Without a doubt. He joined as a contributing editor and essentially created the gonzo style of journalism within those pages. His most famous work, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, was first published as a serial in Rolling Stone in 1971.
And he stayed with the magazine for a long time.
He did. He continued to write for the political section until his death in 2005. But beyond Thompson, the magazine was garnering serious accolades for its investigative reporting.
Could you detail some of the specific stories that earned them this recognition?
Certainly. There are 3 or 4 that really stand out as pivotal. First, there was the coverage of the Altamont Free Concert in 1969.
Where Meredith Hunter was killed.
That's right, killed by a member of the Hells Angels. The magazine's deep reporting on that event, published in the January 21, 1970 issue, won a Specialized Journalism Award at the National Magazine Awards in 1971. It was a defining moment where they reported on the dark side of the very culture they were supposed to be celebrating.
And then soon after, Charles Manson.
Yes, later in 1970, they published a massive feature on Charles Manson. This is a 30,000-word piece by David Dalton and David Felton. It was exhaustive.
Did they speak with him directly?
They did. It included an interview with Manson while he was being held in the Los Angeles County Jail. That piece won Rolling Stone its very first National Magazine Award. It demonstrated that they could handle long-form, complex criminal reporting at the highest level.
They also covered the abduction of Patty Hearst extensively.
They did, the entire Odyssey. And perhaps the most surprising expansion of their scope was their coverage of the space program.
That seems far afield from their usual subject matter.
It does. But in 1972, Jann Wenner assigned Tom Wolfe to cover the launch of Apollo 17. That assignment led to a 4-part series published in 1973 titled Post-Orbital Remorse.
What was the subject of that series?
It explored the depression some astronauts felt after returning from space, the come down from that incredible experience. And that series was the seed that eventually grew into Wolfe's seminal book, The Right Stuff.
So the magazine was effectively funding major literary nonfiction.
Exactly. It shows how Wenner was using the magazine to publish high-level work that had very little to do with rock music, but everything to do with American culture.
Visually, this era was also defined by a specific photographer.
Annie Leibovitz. She began running photographs in the magazine in 1970 and was named chief photographer in 1973. She shot over 140 covers. Her visual style became completely synonymous with the magazine's identity.
But the geographical identity of the magazine changed toward the end of the decade.
It did. In 1977, the headquarters moved from San Francisco to New York City.
What prompted that move?
Jann Wenner felt that the cultural center of gravity had shifted. He famously declared that San Francisco had become a, quote, cultural backwater.
A strong statement.
It was. By moving to New York, he was signaling that Rolling Stone was no longer just a voice of the West Coast counterculture. It was a national, industry-adjacent publication ready to compete on the biggest stage.
This transition to New York seems to usher in the next phase of the magazine's history in the 1980s and 90s, where the focus shifted noticeably toward entertainment and a different aesthetic.
The 1980s marked a very distinct pivot. The magazine broadened its scope to include movies, celebrities, and general pop culture. And this was also a business decision designed to attract a different tier of advertisers.
How did they signal that change to the advertising world?
In 1985, they hired an advertising agency to create a campaign called Perception Reality. The goal was to change the perception of the typical Rolling Stone reader.
The idea being that advertisers still saw them as hippies.
Precisely. Advertisers might have thought the readership was still comprised of 1960s counterculture types. The campaign used these striking visual comparisons of 60s symbols against 80s symbols to show that their readers were now affluent, modern consumers. It was a very successful move to increase ad revenue.
Yet they maintained their literary ambitions during this commercial shift.
Yes, and arguably took them to a new level. Tom Wolfe, continuing his relationship with the magazine, wrote to Wenner, proposing a serialized novel.
Modeled after Dickens.
Exactly. Modeled after the way Charles Dickens and William Makepeace Thackeray published their works in the 19th century. Wenner agreed and paid Wolfe around $200,000 to serialize the work.
And this became the bonfire of the vanities.
That's right. It was published bi-weekly from 1984 to 1985. It's a remarkable instance of a commercial magazine funding the creation of a major literary novel in real time.
Physically, the magazine changed as well during this period.
It did. In 1980, they moved to a gloss paper, large format size, 10 by 12 inches. This moved them away from the newsprint feel of the founding era and firmly into the magazine category on the newsstand.
But this shift toward gloss and celebrity coverage led to criticism.
It did. By the late 90s and early 2000s, many observers felt the magazine was emphasizing style over substance. The criticism was that they were chasing a younger demographic interested in youth-oriented TV shows.
Like Dawson's Creek or Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Exactly, rather than the serious journalism that had defined the 70s.
Despite that criticism, the magazine experienced a resurgence in journalistic relevance in the late 2000s, driven largely by two specific writers.
That's correct. After a period of, perceived decline in relevance, the magazine found its footing again through the work of Matt Taibbi and Michael Hastings.
Let's start with Taibbi.
Matt Taibbi joined in the late 2000s, and his coverage of the 2008 financial crisis was absolutely blistering. In a 2009 report, he famously described the investment bank Goldman Sachs.
I think I remember this quote.
You probably do. He called it a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity, relentlessly jamming its blood funnel into anything that smells like money.
A very vivid image.
It became one of the defining characterizations of the financial meltdown. He also did incredible on-the-ground reporting in Florida about the foreclosure courts. That piece was titled Invasion of the Home Snatchers, and it documented the irregularities in the legal processing of home seizures.
And Michael Hastings delivered a story that had immediate consequences for the U.S. military command.
The Hastings story is perhaps the most significant piece of political reporting the magazine has done in the 21st century. In 2010, he published an article called The Runaway General.
This is about General Stanley McChrystal.
Yes, who was the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan at the time. In the piece, McChrystal and his aides were quoted criticizing Vice President Joe Biden and other senior members of the Obama administration.
And the fallout was immediate.
Absolutely immediate. General McChrystal was recalled to Washington, D.C., and he resigned shortly after the publication. It proved that Rolling Stone, despite its covers of pop stars, could still drive the national news cycle and impact government policy at the very highest level.
During this same period, the magazine attempted a diversification into the hospitality industry.
Yes, briefly. It's a bit of a footnote, but an interesting one. In 2009 and 2010, there was a plan to launch a chain of Rolling Stone restaurants.
Like a Hard Rock Cafe model.
Something like that. One opened in Hollywood at the Hollywood and Highland Center. It was meant to be a lunch, dinner, and nightclub venue. It operated from roughly 2011 to early 2013 before it closed. It was an attempt to leverage the brand name into a physical location, but it ultimately did not succeed.
We must now address the significant controversies that have affected the magazine's reputation. There have been several high-profile instances where the magazine's reporting or editorial judgment was called into question. We will review these chronologically and factually.
It's important to look at these dispassionately. They highlight the risks involved in the type of high-wire journalism the magazine sometimes attempts, as well as the failures in their editorial safeguards.
Let's start with a more general, long-running critique.
One recurring criticism, which is less a single scandal and more a critique of their worldview, is a generational bias. Critics have long argued that the magazine favors the music and culture of the 1960s and 70s over subsequent eras.
Is there a clear example of that?
A very clear example is their treatment of the band Led Zeppelin. In the 1970s, Rolling Stone critics largely and quite famously panned the band. Yet in 2006, the magazine ran a cover story calling them the heaviest band of all time.
So a complete reversal.
A complete reversal.
Yeah.
It reflects a retrospective correction that critics argue validates that initial bias.
Moving to specific reporting controversies, in 2003 there was a story regarding HIV transmission.
Yes, the article was titled Bug Chasers. It made the claim that 25% of new HIV cases were among men who were bug chasing or intentionally seeking to be infected.
A very sensational statistic.
Extremely. However, after publication, the physicians who were cited in the article denied ever making those statements, and the statistic itself was widely challenged as being unsupported by any credible data.
2 years later, in 2005, there was an article regarding vaccines.
This was an article titled Deadly Immunity, written by Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. It purported to show a link between vaccines and autism. The article was heavily criticized for quoting material out of context.
And what was the magazine's response?
Rolling Stone eventually had to amend the story with several corrections, as the scientific consensus and the context of the quotes did not support the article's conclusions.
In 2013, the controversy was visual, involving the cover image of the Boston Marathon bomber.
Yes, in August 2013, the magazine featured Dzhokhar Tsarnaev on the cover. He was, of course, the accused Boston Marathon bomber.
The photo itself wasn't new, though.
That's a key point. The photo was a selfie he had taken, which had actually appeared on the front page of the New York Times previously. However, the context of placing him on the cover of Rolling Stone, a space usually reserved for rock stars and celebrities, drew immediate accusations that the magazine was glamorizing terrorism.
And the backlash was severe.
It was severe and it was commercial. CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Kmart, and many other major retailers refused to sell that specific issue. The magazine defended the decision, arguing it was part of their tradition of serious coverage of complex cultural issues, but the public perception was overwhelmingly negative.
Then in 2014 came the story regarding the University of Virginia.
This is likely the most damaging journalistic failure in the magazine's recent history. They published a story titled "A Rape on Campus" by a reporter named Sabrina Erdely.
What did the story allege?
It detailed an alleged gang rape at the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity at the University of Virginia. Following publication, investigations by the Washington Post and the Charlottesville police revealed major discrepancies, errors, and omissions in the reporting. The story simply unraveled.
What were the consequences of this retraction?
The story was officially retracted in April 2015. The managing editor, Will Dana, left the magazine shortly thereafter.
And there was legal fallout.
Substantial legal fallout. Nicole Aramo, an associate dean at UVA, who was depicted negatively in the article, sued for defamation. A jury awarded her $3 million.
And the fraternity sued as well.
Yes, the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity also sued, and they settled out of court for a reported $1.65 million. An external review by the Columbia School of Journalism cited journalistic failure at multiple levels of the editorial process. It was a catastrophic breakdown.
In 2016, the magazine inserted itself into the hunt for a fugitive.
This involved the Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The actor Sean Penn, writing for Rolling Stone, traveled to a jungle hideout to interview Guzman, who was a fugitive at the time.
The ethical controversy here was about editorial control.
That was the core of it. Guzman was given final editorial control. He had pre-approval rights over the published article. This is generally considered a severe violation of journalistic ethics, as it turns the report into something closer to public relations.
And how was the piece received?
When the article was published, it was widely mocked for its style and criticized by journalism organizations like the Society of Professional Journalists. There were also serious questions raised about whether Penn's journey had inadvertently helped authorities locate and capture Guzman, who was arrested shortly after.
There are two more recent controversies to note, one involving ivermectin in 2021.
Yes, in September 2021, Rolling Stone picked up a story from an Oklahoma news outlet. It claimed that hospitals were so full of patients who had overdosed on ivermectin, a drug some were using to treat COVID-19, that gunshot victims could not get beds.
And that wasn't accurate.
The hospital in question flatly denied it. They stated there was no bed shortage due to ivermectin. Rolling Stone had to issue a significant correction, retracting the core point of the story, which, as critics noted, could have been avoided with a simple phone call to the hospital.
And the other case involved a reporter in 2023.
This was the case of James Gordon Meek. Meek was an ABC News reporter and also a contributor to Rolling Stone. He was arrested on federal child pornography charges.
What was the controversy for the magazine?
Rolling Stone broke the news of the investigation, but their initial story framed it as Meek being targeted by the government for his national security reporting. It was later revealed that an editor, Noah Shopman, had the story rewritten to exclude mentions of the child sexual abuse material.
Without the original reporter's knowledge.
Without the original reporter Tatiana Siegel's knowledge. This raised very serious questions about editorial interference and a lack of transparency.
These controversies occurred against a backdrop of significant ownership changes. The magazine is no longer solely owned by the Wenner family.
That is the other major narrative of the last decade. The financial independence of the magazine really ended in 2016. That year, Jann Wenner sold a 49% stake to BandLab Technologies, a company based in Singapore.
And then Penske Media Corporation became involved.
Yes, in 2017, Wenner Media sold the controlling 51% stake to Penske Media Corporation, or PMC. PMC is a large media conglomerate that also owns publications like Variety and Billboard.
So they now own the entire magazine.
As of 2019, yes. In that year, PMC acquired the remaining 49% from BandLab, taking full 100% ownership. The Wenner family no longer controls the publication.
And we have seen new leadership appointed under this ownership.
We have. In August of 2025, Sean Woods and Shirley Halperin were named co-editors-in-chief. And it's notable that Shirley Halperin is the first female editor-in-chief in the magazine's entire history.
The brand has also expanded into live events.
Yes, in 2022, they acquired the Life is Beautiful Festival. This signals that the future of the brand is not just in print or online media, but in physical experiences.
The magazine's history has even become a subject of cultural production itself.
It has. A play titled Retraction, which is based on the controversy surrounding the UVA rape story, opened off-Broadway in January of 2026.
We should also touch on the international reach of the magazine. It's not just an American publication.
It's a global franchise. As of 2025, there are 15 international editions in operation. This includes long-running editions like Rolling Stone Germany and Rolling Stone France, as well as newer launches.
Are there any recent editions?
Yes, Rolling Stone UK was relaunched in 2021. Rolling Stone Philippines launched a print edition in 2025. There have been editions in China, India, Japan, Korea, and throughout Latin America. Some have failed and closed over the years, but the strategy is clearly to license the brand name globally.
Before we conclude, we must mention the cultural impact of the magazine's covers and its lists.
The covers are cultural currency. Appearing on the cover of Rolling Stone is a specific milestone for an artist.
The Beatles have appeared the most, I believe.
As a group or individually, yes, over 30 times. The first 10 issues alone featured icons like Tina Turner, Jim Morrison, and Janis Joplin.
They even experimented with the format of the cover.
They did. In 2006, for their 1000th issue, they actually produced a 3D hologram cover that reportedly cost $1 million to produce.
And regarding the lists, the 500 greatest albums and 500 greatest songs.
These serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they generate immense debate and engagement, which drives traffic, but they also function as a kind of historical record. The website uses these lists to provide biographical context for artists.
For example,
For instance, the entry for Toots and the Maytals connects their song Do the Reggae to the actual coining of the term reggae. These lists help codify the canon of popular music, for better or for worse.
we've covered nearly 60 years of history, from a $7,500 loan and a helmet-wearing John Lennon to a multimedia empire owned by a corporation that also owns Variety and Billboard.
It's a trajectory that really mirrors the capitalization of rock and roll itself.
The publication survived the decline of print media when many of its peers did not.
It did. It survived its own scandals. It has evolved from a counterculture newsletter that parodied the New York Times into a legacy institution that is now part of a major media conglomerate.
One final thought to leave you with. We discussed the perception reality campaign from the 1980s, where the magazine tried to convince advertisers that its readers were part of the establishment. Looking at the magazine today, owned by Penske Media, investing in festivals, publishing lists that define the canon, it seems that the reality has finally overtaken the perception.
That's a valid observation.
If the magazine started by reflecting the changes in rock and roll, its current state perhaps reflects the fact that rock and roll has become a business just like any other. Thanks for listening.